My guest today is Havana Solaun. Havana most recently played for the Houston Dash in the NWSL and has represented Jamaica at the international level. Havana will talk to us today about how she's thought about and managed her money throughout her playing career, especially as she has dealt with injuries. Here's my conversation with Havana Solaun. Havana, I am very grateful to have you here today because your career has spanned a lot of growth in the women's game. And so I'm interested to hear how those different stages in your career impacted you financially. So let's start early on. When you decided to enter the draft, did you have any thoughts or concerns or discussions with family members or other folks about what the financial impact of going pro would be to you?
It's funny because I think at that time the league was 3 years old, and the only thing on my mind was, can I get a contract? The numbers on the contract didn't matter. There was this mindset of like, oh, it is just a privilege to be here and to be in a league and to be playing women's soccer. So at the time, the number on the contract that I was signing was like not irrelevant, but it wasn't really a focus. I wasn't thinking about the implications. I wasn't even thinking about the future. I was like, man, I have a pro contract. And like that for me was like the pinnacle of success, not living wages, not being able to save for the future. It was like, can I play soccer every day?
And then was there ever a moment like a year later, 3 years later, where you were like, oh, I maybe I wish I was making more money than I was? Like some moment where that thought process kind of changed from day one.
Um, I wish that I could say it came sooner. I would say it came a lot later in my career. I think early on I was very tunnel vision. I was so focused on playing, I was so focused on being successful on the field that the financial stability or the lack thereof was just not on my mind. I also live a very simple life. I have very few bills. I have always been a little bit of like a minimalist. So
Hmm.
I think the impact of my small salary wasn't hugely felt. Um, and I would say the more my career came closer to the end, so after 5 years, I was like, okay, I've been playing for 5 years. We're getting into, 6, 7, 8. Then you start to think about retirement. It wasn't until then, really, that I started to think about the financial side of my situation.
So kind of take me through a given season, and you can pick the year. Like, how often did you think about money, or how often were you forced to like make a financial decision where you had to look at your bank account or pay attention in some way that maybe you weren't doing as much as some other people at that age in different careers?
I mean, I would say it was like a perpetual task, right? Like, I think as an athlete, there's this fine line. So, my body is my office, but the way that I eat, the way that I recover, all of those things cost money. So, are you getting extra massages? Are you buying the highest quality food that you can? And that I think is where, I mean, the answer was no, I wasn't. I
Hmm.
understood the importance of it, but I was always on the cusp. I was like, okay, I know that I can afford to eat the highest quality like meat or produce for X amount of days, or you're always thinking about it. I remember early in my career, like hearing, I don't know the exact number, so I'm gonna blow this one, but it was like LeBron James spends like 10 grand on his body. And I was like, wow, that's like one more than my salary.
Right.
Two, I was like, yeah, I would love to be able to care for my body though in that way where I'm like massages X amount of times, having access to all of the highest like technology of recovery. Like those things were just not an option. From a financial standpoint, like food obviously is a must, whether or not you're an athlete. And for me, I was like, that's the only place that I can really push my limits on what I'm willing to pay. Otherwise, if the team's not supplying it, I'm not doing it.
Do you remember a specific like experience or event where you really wanted to buy this one food or get this, one massage, and you either couldn't do it and that was very like stressful for you, or you did it anyway and you're like, I'll just deal with the financial ramifications later?
Um, I would say no. I never did it only because I've always been, I like to play it on the safe side. Um, I think there were times where I was living in different cities. I've always believed in like eating like whole foods and like organic foods and shopping from farms.
Hmm.
That comes at a price. So I would say that there are times that I would sacrifice that. I'd be like, I'm just going to go to the grocery store. It is cheaper opposed to going to like the farm itself.
Sure.
That would be it. But as far as like the massages and stuff, usually massages are like $100, and I'm like, that's too big of a, yeah, let me just do this once. Whereas
Yeah.
like food, we're talking smaller numbers, so the risk there just feels smaller. So no, there's not like one moment because I was like, I just didn't do it. I like wouldn't really um take that risk.
Yeah. And so then maybe on the more like positive side, do you remember a moment later in your career where you're like, yeah, now I can do this, or now I'm going to do this because my salary has increased at least somewhat from where it was when I first started?
Um, I think by the time that my salary was in a place that I was like comfortable doing those things, it wasn't until I played for 9 years, and it probably took year 8 before I got there. And by year 8, I'm thinking about retirement. I'm thinking I'm at that point, I'm 4 surgeries in. I know I only have a couple of years left. I'm like now so consciously thinking about that, that while the number has gone up, the freedom with it has not gone up.
Sure.
So that was never a place that I, to be honest, got to.
Okay. A lot of people's financial outlook or financial decisions are influenced very strongly by the people around them. The experiences people have with their parents growing up around money, or nowadays social media, and maybe in your case, teammates or even coaches. Can you pinpoint like any specific people or any specific times? And you don't have to name the people, but people who throughout your journey had some influence on how you thought about money and the decisions that you made.
Yeah, so I think for me, and probably with most people, like family is where it starts. And I remember when I was like young, I mean, I was like 10, and I have 2 sisters, and we always had chores we had to do every week. And if you did all your chores, you got $3. $1 for savings, one for spending, and one for charity. And that was just like the way it went. And if you did not do your chores, you only got $1 for charity. And so in my mind, whenever we got money, like that was how we split it:
Hmm.
savings, spendings, charity. And so it's funny looking back now. I think my mom had a lot of foresight in the way that she taught us that. But I thought that was normal. I was like, okay, cool. Like, this is what we do when we get our $3. And when we don't do our work, we don't get our spending dollar. Like, we don't get the fun money. Um, and that's honestly like my first experience with it. And I think growing up, it kind of led to why I tended to save a lot, and I didn't really do a lot of like frivolous spending, sometimes to a detriment. But yeah, that definitely shaped the way that I handled whatever money I was making.
Did you ever have people around you, or again, it could be a social media influence, who were using money or thinking about money in ways that were very different to that approach and how you were raised, that kind of made you, if not question, like at least have to maintain that discipline of like, no, I'm going to keep saving and I'm not going to do this thing.
I think the biggest one, which is not a direct answer, but in college, a lot of my friends had credit cards that were like, oh, this is my mom's. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, this credit card is like my mom's account. And I was like, oh, so you spend your mom's money. And it was a very confusing concept for me. I had always grown up very like autonomous with my money. And my mom always like taught us like how to handle our money, but we never had like credit cards with like our parents' names on them,
Sure.
right? They were ours and our money that we earned, or nothing. And so I remember being like, wow, how do you choose? So like we would go to coffee and they'd be like, oh, this one's on my mom. And I would be like, oh, interesting. It was such a foreign concept to me to swipe a card and have no effect on your personal account.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was probably my biggest like, oh, this is a unique way to do money.
Did did that family influence remain your main source of guidance during the years when you were managing your own money for the first time, or when you were, struggling with a smaller salary than you would have liked?
To be honest, money was pretty infrequently spoken about um, within the family. I think for me, I had this mindset that, oh, well, I'm not making that much. I don't need to be doing anything with it. I regret having that mindset. I wish that, like, in those moments early on in my career, I could have been like, what do you think I should be doing? Because I think both of my parents, respectively, handle money differently, but I respect the way they both do it.
Hmm.
So I think I would have had good exposure to many options and they would have been happy to talk about it. I just didn't really acknowledge the importance of starting those conversations when I was like 25, 24. I was like, oh, those are for like adults. I'm not an adult yet. And I think it took me too long to realize the importance of even the resources that I did have. Even if I didn't believe what they believed with money, hearing it, I think would help me get closer to know what I want to do with mine.
And do you think that's more of an individual like personality trait or experience, or just a very common mindset for someone who's so focused on being the best that they can be at at what they do that it's like everything else is noise and pushed to the side?
It's hard to say. I would like to believe I'm not the only one that was like telling them to like
I'm
focus
not
on the.
accusing you of anything. Don't
Oh, yeah,
worry.
yeah. I would like to think I'm not the only one. I think that we live in a pretty unique bubble in our careers and what we're focused on. We tend to have a little bit of blinders on. And I think you almost need that in order to be successful in that space.
Hmm.
But I think there is a time and place where those blinders need to be pulled back a little. And hopefully by people on the outside who can see it, who know, who, like, whether that's a veteran teammate who's like, hey, this is what you need to be doing. Um, I do think that there is a lot of that in the space where people are like, this is my goal. This is what I'm focusing on. And that takes precedent over anything, it seems.
Yeah. And maybe that's a good transition to my next question, which is how did the off season look different for you financially, if at all, than during the season when you were so laser focused on what you had to do next?
It evolved as the league evolved. So at the beginning, we had like a 5 month off season, and you don't get paid during the off season.
Yeah.
So that was like, all right, like what job am I going to get? How am I going to train while having a job? It needs to be obviously part time. It needs to be flexible. It needs to be not on my feet. It needs to be all these things. Um, Whereas as towards the end of my career, you had the holidays off,
Hmm.
so the financial strain was almost more because you've got more expenses. You're flying home. You've got the holidays. You're not in your space. Um, but we were making money year round by the end of my career. Um, so I would say that it fluctuated based on the time, like where the league was at,
Yeah.
um, in the requirement of do I need to get another job? Um, I would say the off season was just more stressful, generally speaking. Like moving around, figuring out training, figuring out financial things. In season, you're so in routine that I know my costs for the week. I know all of these things, um, and home is such like a became such a relative space. My dog is 4 years old, and she has lived in 12 different homes. No, and it's
Yeah.
like it's hard to it's not like off season is I'm in this one apartment that is my home and in the off season I train at the facility. Like that wasn't really the way that it worked. I think that the league is moving towards that will be the way that, it will be for some players with stability, with resources, with access. That just wasn't my experience in the last 8. Um so the off season was honestly like a stressful time.
Research has shown that people in some professions who work very long hours, that when they do get a break, they are very eager to spend or like go big with their money because they've had that like pent up for so long, like so many hours that weren't their own, or so much money that they earned that they couldn't really spend because they didn't have the time to. You may have already answered that question in what you just said, but did you ever feel that, or did you ever see people, teammates around you, feeling that, where it's like, now I have a little time, or I have a breather, or I work so hard I just need some release, and I'm going to do something relatively extravagant or expensive?
I mean, maybe if I had like a big lump sum of money, I would do that. I don't think that financially, the closest I ever came to that was with after the World Cup, we got a bonus for making it to a certain level. And
Hmm.
I remember being like, cool, this whole entire thing is going into savings. And people would be like, go get like one thing, go get like something nice. And I was like, at that point, this was 2024. So I was like, I'm very well aware I'm on the back end. And
Yeah.
I was like, I know that I need a little bit of like a financial cushion for post career. So that was probably one of the times that I got like one lump sum that was unexpected. It wasn't part of my salary
Hmm.
that I probably could have done that. And I was terrified to do it because I was in that mindset switch already of like, oh my gosh, my career is like on its a way out. And then I'm like not gonna have a house, I'm not gonna have a salary, and I'm not gonna have a job. I need some kind of cushion.
Yeah.
So definitely didn't spend that.
And do you think that was influenced by any? You mentioned veteran teammates previously. Do you think that was influenced by anyone else that you had seen in a similar stage, or is that more just the that mindset that your parents had instilled in you with your savings habits?
I would say that was with my parents.
Okay.
Throughout my career, there was very little talk of like financial anything. I think at the beginning, especially when people were making, there was a little bit more of a gap of like what people were making. There was a lot of identity tied to the number you were getting paid. And I think it made us hesitant to speak openly to teammates about it. That information is now more like available. And I haven't experienced this, but I would hope that it would open doors for teammates to kind of have those conversations about, hey, like, what do you do with your, if we got a bonus, or what do you do when you started making X amount? And um, just seeing what other people in the same situation are doing, I think can be really insightful. I never did it,
Yeah.
but I could see that it could be very helpful.
I want to come back to that later stage in your career, but you spent several years playing abroad. Can you talk about what the financial ramifications of making that choice were, and how much of it you felt like you were aware of going into that situation compared to what you learned, while you were there or after the fact?
Yeah, so I played in Norway for a year in 2019. And I remember going overseas, like, I wasn't even really concerned about the financial side of things. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in a foreign country. I'm going to be doing all these things. And like a contract kind of looks the same, obviously. Like you sign it, there's a number on it. Cool. So I kind of went there excited because the number on my contract was higher than numbers I'd seen in the past. And I did the little conversion from, Norwegian currency to US dollar. And I was like, wow,
Hmm.
that's still higher. Great. Um, and then once I started receiving payments, I started to realize I was like, why is this number so low? This is not adding up mathematically, whatever. And that's when I was like, oh, taxes are different. Um, and I think that was like a very frustrating learning curve for me. Um, because once I'd already signed the contract, I was like, I'm already here. I wasn't itching to go overseas. It was my career needed it at the time. But in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm going to get minutes, I'm going to get experience. And on the plus side, I'm finally going to make some money. And so when I was halfway through that experience and I realized, oh, you're actually not going to make money, I think I came back to this like belief, not belief, but what kept me going was I was like, I didn't play women's soccer to make a lot of money. That's never why I signed up. And I kind of always had that in the back of my mind when situations like this would happen, where I'd be like, I get to do what I love, and maybe that's enough. Um, so yeah, going overseas and learning that like every country does taxes differently and they take different percentages was a tough thing to learn the hard way.
You talked about the volatility of the off season. Was there a similar dynamic at play there where you had to perhaps pay more attention to your finances and like, what things were costing and, how is this going to add up at the end of the day, end of the month, because it was such a new and different environment for you?
Not really. Um, I mean, it took a while to get used to obviously the change in currency. The numbers are very different. They look very different. They look very high there because it's like 107, and you're like, how much is that in US dollars? Trying to do the
Sure.
math in your head, whatever. Um, but I mean, the way that I would conduct things were kind of the same. I spent my money on quality food. Um, I will say I don't think I traveled as much as I would have liked. In Europe, you're so close to so many things that I really didn't utilize that. Um, but otherwise, I would say that it was pretty much the same.
Okay. You talked about things, or you mentioned things you wish you had done when you were early in your career. If you could go back to those first few years, what different financial choices would you make that you might encourage other young players to make today?
I will give you my answer, but then I would also be like, man, I wish I actually had the answer to that because while I have increased my financial literacy, I don't think that I have fully done so. Um, I wish that I had started a Roth IRA from the jump. I think that that would have given me a security that would have been slowly building to where it obviously it's not money I'll touch for a very long time, but something as simple as that I think would have been a really nice like security to have. Um, I think it's hard to answer that question because I'm still in the process of understanding the investment side of things. I'm still in the process of understanding where whatever lump sum of money I have, where's the best place for that to be.
Hmm.
Um, and I think so. My biggest advice would be have conversations with people that you trust, because I think ultimately that is the biggest regret was not having those conversations when I was younger in my career, in my financial journey. Because I don't know the answers, and I'm sure you do, to what do these young players need to be doing when, and maybe it's broken down by bracket, right? Like if you're making in this salary, this is what you should be doing this salary. And it's not a one size fits all, but I do believe that starting those conversations is the like best first step.
All right, I won't put you on the spot for financial advice
Yeah,
anymore.
please. Yeah, no, please don't link my number to any advice that
This
has
is not professional financial advice, folks. So you mentioned, what you did with that bonus after Australia. When do you feel like you really started to think about and maybe even worry about your financial future after your playing days?
definitely right after my knee injury. So my career in 2020, we're in 24, the end of last season, um, I hurt my knee. I knew in that moment it was going to require surgery. I knew that I was in the end of my contract with Houston. And so I was like, wow, I'm in a really vulnerable position right now. I'm 32. I'm going on to a fifth surgery. I was pretty sure Houston wasn't going to re-sign me, despite my opinions on that. And that's when I was like, man, I'm in a little bit of like a precarious situation because now I stand to no longer have salary, no longer compete for a salary because it's going to be a 9 month recovery. And I remember, like I said, I've had multiple surgeries and injuries, but in that moment, I was like, oh, wow. So this is like, it happened so quickly. I went from like, because at that time, if you'd asked me when do you want to retire, I would have said I want to play for like another like 2 years. I wasn't in a place where I was like, this is it for me. But that surgery and the timing of that surgery, I was there 1 month left in season. I was like, oh, this could be it for me. And
Yeah,
if it is, the money stops coming on December 31.
right.
So it was a very like last minute abrupt and fast realization, I would say.
Once once that happened, what did you feel like you could control, or what steps did you feel like you could take to do whatever you could to put yourself in the best financial position, whether you were able to keep playing or whether you had to turn the page to something else?
I mean, at that point, my first thought was like, okay, I got to mitigate costs. I have to move home because paying rent, that's 2 grand out the window every month.
Hmm.
Um, I moving home also like lowers like food costs. My mom is going to feed me. And so there's a frustrating aspect to that of like being 32 and like requiring to go home to find that stability. Um, but home was also where I do my rehab. I went to the University of Florida. My family lives in Gainesville. So for me, it was like, okay, you're moving home, but like regardless, you were gonna do rehab there. Like
Hmm.
regardless, you're not gonna rent an apartment in this town that your mom. Like it was a double edged. The difference was once I recovered, I was like, now what? Where do I go? Whereas it's always been recovering to go back to a team, to go back into season, to be ready. And there was a point in time where I was trying really hard to be ready for the next season. Um, I was given a timeline. And I was like, okay, if I push this timeline, I could potentially be ready.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, I spent those next 6 months just like head down. Can I get to a place where I can like convince a team I'm ready to go for preseason? And then I had a couple setbacks, and I was like, no, realistically, I can't. So I think in that time, like my biggest thought was like, how can I mitigate costs and how can I make money in some capacity, which was challenging because usually it's coaching. But when you are not able to run and not able to cut, it makes
Sure.
coaching more challenging from soccer coaching more challenging. You kind of need to do those things.
Yeah. So similar question to what I asked about, earlier in your career, and this doesn't need to be financial advice, but based on that experience, what would you say to someone who, is nearing 30 or has been in the league for, 7, 8 years and may find themselves in a similar situation to what, you ended up being in? What steps, like proactively, do you think someone should do, or do you wish you had done to, mitigate any worst case scenario?
Um, it's tough because I do think about that in how is there a way that I could have like my contract was coming to the end in like the end of that year anyways, and I'm like, man,
Hmm.
should I have like been on another contract, signed on another contract before then? Could I have found security in another contract? I think, and I would say this openly, but I do feel that as a club to not re-sign a player that got injured on your watch is disrespectful. Um, and I have my qualms with Houston in the way that they have treated players in the past. And I think that's important that when you're picking a club, you don't always get to pick, to be clear. Sometimes you end up traded, sometimes you end up in a team that you don't love, an organization that you don't trust. But when you have the ability to choose, it is really important to make that choice when you're thinking about when you're playing at your best, every team wants you. But when you're at your worst, is that team still going to be there? And
Hmm.
there are clubs in this league that I do think do things right, and there are clubs in this league that do things differently. Um, and that was a risk I think I took with Houston, and it didn't pan out. So I think it's important that in the spaces you can control, if I'm moving because I desire to move, I'm not being traded, like whatever, can I choose a club that I trust will have my back? I think that's really important. I think, our bodies are our career. And will the club value that when I'm not able to perform for them?
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's hard. I think in any sports career, there's so much unpredictability that it's like there's not a whole lot you can control.
Yeah. So if you look ahead, for the next couple of years and even further out, what would financial success look like to you?
I think for me, financial success is, and it's a simple, maybe it's simple, maybe it's not. I want to be able to go to the grocery store and not look at the price tags. For me, that is where financial stability feels. Because, like I said, the way that I live my life, I live very minimally, and I really value food. I think food is like physical health, it's mental health. Like the way I take care of my body is the way I take care of my mind. And I think being able to like go to the farmer's market and purchase whatever I want um, is a level of security and stability that like would be successful for me. Because if I'm doing that, that also means my apartment, my house, whatever is like covered and not thought about. Because I think your fixed costs come first, and then which is going to be car insurance, rent, all of those things.
Hmm.
If you're at the grocery store and you're just buying whatever you want, those things are already covered. Those things are already taken care of, like they are whatever. So for me, it would be as simple as that. I want to go to the grocery store and not have to look at price tags.
So maybe I know the answer to my last question, and that is, what's your favorite thing to spend money on?
Food and coffee.
Okay.
Food and coffee.
What kind of
Now,
coffee?
I love a latte. Just a
Okay.
latte. I want to go to every coffee shop and try everybody's latte.
Okay.
Um,
I
either
hope you
that.
made the most of your time in Norway then.
Um, Norway, I was in a farm town where there was more tractors than cars on the road. There was no coffee shops in my like little town. I did find phenomenal coffee shops like in the city, but I couldn't like walk. So I did enjoy it, but I do think I missed out a little bit on like a daily latte.
Yeah,
I was drinking like a French press when I was there. Doesn't quite hit the same.
right. You are doing some writing these days. Where can folks read your writing?
I am writing on Substack, um, basically a blog site. And yeah, I'm just telling a story of what it's been like for the last few months and like my lessons I learned throughout my career. Um, and kind of showing like another side of me, maybe a deeper side of me.
If someone was going to search for it, does it have a specific title or is it just your name?
Yeah, so it's called Outside the Lines.
Okay, perfect. Havana, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being so open and sharing your thoughts with us.
Of course.